Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2, and in today's video I'm going to be going over some of the best gear and weapon mods that you guys should be looking out for, some of which being so strong that they'll literally double your damage output. There's a ton of new mods that were added to the game with Worldslayer that are incredibly strong, but on top of that, most of the mods in the game actually got hugely rebalanced, so what's going to be good now is completely different from what was good just a few weeks ago. In this video I plan to detail all of what I consider to be the best mods in the game, explaining why they're so good, and under which circumstance you should probably use them. This video is designed to be applicable to every character in the game. I'm going to be going over gear, weapon mods, which mods are better for survivability, which mods are better for anomaly power, firepower, etc. As such, the video will be rather extensive, but hopefully in the process you guys have a much better understanding of which mods you should be looking out for, so you have an easier time making your builds. If you'd like to see the build that you see on screen here, please make sure to like the video or leave a comment down below so I can kind of gauge how much of a demand there is for a video on this build. Real quick before we get into it, I want to give a big thanks to today's sponsor, Ironside Computers. If you guys are looking to customize and build a brand new PC, there's no better place to go than Ironside. They have a ridiculous amount of options so you can make the exact PC that you've been looking for to fit all of your hardware needs. With an insane amount of case options, component options, custom liquid cooling, and even being able to UV print on some designs to the side panels of your case, just like they did with the amazing PC that they sent me, which runs amazingly by the way, you can easily make your dream computer with Ironside. Not only that, but each PC comes with a 5-year labor and 3-year part warranty, so if anything goes wrong, you can just hit them up and get it sorted out easy. On top of that, if you use my coupon code NICK2, you'll get free shipping on your order if you're based in the US. Definitely make sure to check Ironside out. They're also hosting a giveaway over on their YouTube channel for a super insane $4,000 PC, so definitely make sure to check that out if you want a chance of winning that computer. Links, of course, in the description as always, and a huge thanks to Ironside for sponsoring this channel. Alright, let's just jump into the mods. There's a lot to cover here. Super quickly, I wanted to ask if you guys could check me out on Twitch. I would highly appreciate it. I've been streaming pretty much every single day, and on Saturday, the 2nd of July, I plan to do a subathon event. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of trials carries for you guys so we can get through, the bosses, help you get some XP. I'm going to be a higher APOC tier, so you get even more XP because you'll be playing with me, as well as just getting a whole bunch of loot for everybody, helping everybody out. And we're going to be making a ton of new builds as well. It's going to be a really good time, so I'd highly appreciate you guys checking me out, showing some support if you are interested in that. But anyways, let's just get into the mods. Alright, so starting off with the mods, there's actually like an insane amount of mod options here, and a lot of which are pretty good. I'm pretty much only going to be talking about which ones I think are like actually categorically the best, and what is best really depends on what build you're using, so I'm going to kind of talk in a vague general sense, but ultimately you guys should get the gist anyway. We're going to start off with gear mods, and we'll just talk about some specific ones. We're going to go over all the better ones, and then we'll start talking about weapon mods later. One of the more recent changes is that a lot of the status effect mods such as Ashen Boost got nerfed. So Ashen Boost used to be 20% extra damage against enemies afflicted with Ash, and it is now 10%. Similarly, Bloody Boost used to be 15%, and it is now 8%. This is going to heavily affect certain builds that are taking advantage of these. Almost every single build in the game is going to take advantage of some form of status effect mod. For example, if you're playing Devastator, you're going to be using Bloody Boost along with Tainted Blood. If you're playing Pyromancer, you probably are using Ashen Boost or at least Bullet Kindling. If you are playing Technomancer, you're most likely going to be using Radical Therapy. A lot of people are asking me, is it still worth to be using these mods? Even with their lowered values, these are still some of the better mods in the game. Even Trample the Weak and Bullet Kindling are some of the better examples because they remain at 12%, which is still an insanely strong damage value. I mean, 12% extra damage flat is incredibly powerful. It really just depends on what some of your other options are. Ultimately, though, I think these status effect mods, they aren't as good as they used to be, but they are still very good. Particularly the T3 ones, being Euthanizer and Bloody Boost, are still 16%, and that is like a ridiculous amount of extra damage. So if you have a way to be applying these status effects, these are still incredibly good to use, and we'll talk more about being able to apply status effects and taking advantage of these mods when it comes to the weapon mod section. Another very good mod when it comes to applying status effects is Virulent Compound. It is 10%, so it's slightly better than Euthanizer. However, it does have the potential, I haven't tested this, but it does have the potential to actually count separate from these status effect mods, so then you'd pretty much be able to take advantage of it by being a separate multiplier, because maybe it could stack on top of dealing 16% extra toxic damage with Euthanizer or whatever in the toxic skills tree. It could actually count as a separate thing, but I haven't entirely tested that. Regardless though, this is one of the newer mods, and 10% damage against elites rather than like the 8% from Euthanizer is still pretty good. Ultimately, these status mods are still something that you guys should look out for, and in most cases prioritize. Somehow I forgot to mention Captain Hunter. I mean, Captain Hunter, pretty simple, just going to increase your damage against elites by a flat 16%, which is on its own multiplier, so this is ultimately one of the better mods in the entire game, and I'd highly recommend using it for literally every build that you make. Alright, I swapped over to my Techno and I want to talk about some firepower mods specifically. We'll talk about which ones are the best for firepower based builds. If you're interested in anomaly power stuff, just skip to the anomaly power section. When it comes to firepower based builds, it's worth understanding how weapon damage is actually going to be calculated in this game. I'm not going to go super in depth on it. Basically, the more firepower that you get, represented by this yellow number, the more weapon damage percent that you're actually going to get. This weapon damage percent number is relative to the firepower amount that's on your gun, but more often than not, it's kind of going to even out. It's not really worth mentioning that all too much. Basically, the more firepower that you get, the more weapon damage bonus percent that you're going to end up achieving. The more weapon damage percent that you go above 100% is going to result in some diminishing returns. So basically, if I were to gain 10% additional damage bonus right now, it wouldn't actually be 10% because I would need a significantly higher number than that to actually achieve a flat 10%, because 10% is not actually 10% of 135%. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically, I'm just saying a lot of numbers. If you don't know how diminishing returns works with math, I would just look it up. But basically, the higher this number goes, the less and less valuable each subsequent percentage is going to be. When it comes to firepower builds, you're stacking weapon damage very significantly. Just with the firepower that I have on my gear, I have 135% extra bonus, but whenever I activate a decay skill or anything like that, I'm going to drastically increase my weapon damage even more. This is not super important, but it is somewhat important in understanding the hierarchy of the mods, which I'll kind of explain in my own way. When it comes to the flat percent increase to certain type of mods, such as dum-dum bullets, or when it comes to shotguns, these are still really good. The reason being is that it's actually going to give you more than just the 12%, because the assault weapon damage is in its own category. It counts separate from weapon damage. So this 12% actually ends up being significantly more. For my character anyway, it gave me about a 22% increase in overall weapon damage rather than just the 12%. You might think to yourself, okay, 22% sounds really high. Well, let me blow your mind a little bit. So currently, let me take off this glove right here so I can better represent that. So currently, I have a 100% damage increase just from 503,000 firepower, okay? 503,000 firepower is equating to a 104% damage increase. If we take a look at Sharp Eye, a mod that gives us 120,000 firepower stacking 3 times, so 360,000 firepower, that is nearly equivalent, or not really. I mean, I have 500,000, but that is pretty close, only 140,000 firepower away from this 500,000 number. How much you're going to get from this is really going to depend on how much weapon damage percent that you have. The TLDR here is that flat firepower mods are now insanely powerful, specifically the tier 3 ones. As you can see, 503,000 firepower equals to 104% weapon damage bonus, so getting 360,000 firepower is equal to about like 70% or something like that. I'm not exactly going to do the math, but I mean, that's unbelievably significantly better than something like dum-dum bullets, right? 22% versus like 60-70% is a massive difference. In terms of another good mod that's actually going to boost your firepower, it seems a little bit weird, but Anomaly Echo is going to give you flat 200,000 firepower, not quite 360,000, but that's still really, really good. Another mod that's going to give you flat firepower that's insanely strong is going to be Kingslayer. Anytime that you get a crit on an enemy that is an elite, it's going to give you 325,000. Of course, this number is going to scale based on what your level is, but also your level and its weapon damage bonus percent is going to scale based on the firepower of your gun. So relatively speaking, almost no matter what level you are, it's going to give you roughly the same amount of additional weapon damage. Staring to the Barrel is another good option if you're playing like Trickster or you're in close range, maybe Firepower Devastator. If you have this stacked all the way up, it's about 320,000 firepower, but ultimately I think Sharp Eye, Kingslayer, and even Anomaly Echo, funnily enough, are some of the better options for that. You might be wondering, okay, then Bloodlust must be pretty good. Bloodlust did, for some reason, not get affected by the flat increase in a lot of these mods. It's the same story when it comes to crit stack and a lot of the other T2 mods, the ones that give flat numbers here, such as Bloodlust giving a flat 32k rather than it being a percentage. This was supposed to get scaled up, just like the T3 mods did. However, it did not. So this 32,000 stacking 3 times, 90k firepower isn't necessarily bad, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as some other mods that you could get in the T2 category. So when it comes to just stacking flat firepower, I would highly, highly recommend just getting on Sharp Eye, Anomaly Echo, and Kingslayer. Those mods are incredibly powerful for firepower-based builds. Another good option worth mentioning that is specifically for Technomancer is the Cycle. Whenever you use the Painkiller node in the Pax tree, you get some health regen. This is going to give you about 20% weapon damage. However, getting all the other mods that I mentioned before is going to be more valuable than 20% weapon damage. I think that this used to be one of the better mods, and now it is probably one of the worst mods in comparison. Plate Piercer is a fairly interesting mod. If you're able to get a lot of armor piercing, specifically if you're using a weapon with armor piercing, it's going to increase your critical damage by a bonus equal to 50% of your armor piercing. So if you had a weapon that has 40% armor piercing, this will end up giving you 20% extra crit damage, which is incredibly strong. Similarly, resistance piercing will increase your crit damage by whatever percent is equal to your resist piercing. If you're playing a Pyromancer, for example, you could stack upwards of like 200% resistance piercing and take massive advantage of this mod. Now let's talk about some anomaly power mods. Swap back over to my Pyromancer to do that. The first two mods that I want to take a look at are Unstoppable Force and No Resistance Against the Fortified. If you're playing an anomaly power build, you should be using Unstoppable Force. It is incredibly strong. Even if you're not getting all that much resistance piercing, it's not hard to get some because almost every single skill tree is going to have some form of resistance piercing, and you can increase your resistance piercing further by using the No Resistance Against the Fortified, which is going to increase your resist pierce by 100% of whatever your armor pierce is. So even just by having armor pierce on the weapon, that's 30%, plus in the ascension tree we get another 10%. So ultimately we're going to have 40% armor pierce just from having this on our weapon. That is going to give us, with having No Resistance Against the Fortified and Unstoppable Force, a 20% increase to anomaly power just by itself. But on my Pyromancer, I have 40% flat armor pierce, as you can see right here, and also 95% resist pierce because I'm converting some of this into resist pierce, but I also just have resistance pierce also within the ascension tree, but also within my skill tree here. You can get resistance piercing at the top here, at the bottom, you can get it within your packs tree node. And this is similar for all classes. Most classes has some form of getting resistance pierce or armor pierce. As you can see, melting point is going to increase my resist pierce by 15%, etc. You stack this up and I'm getting upwards of almost 100% extra anomaly power with Unstoppable Force when I have absolutely everything scaled up. There's also a node in the skill tree here. Whenever you activate a Ignite Seal, it's going to give you armor pierce and resist pierce. This is insanely powerful. You can even pair No Resistance Against the Fortified with that other Plate Piercer mod that I was mentioning earlier, or firepower builds. These two mods are the single most important things that you guys should be looking out for, and is going to boost your anomaly power builds to the next level because there's just so much additional AP, which is incredibly powerful. Additionally, when it comes to anomaly power builds, a lot of these mods such as Arms and Anomaly and Anomaly Echo also got buffed. So 266,000 anomaly power or 448,000 anomaly power is ridiculously strong. I mean, that is just a crazy amount of anomaly power, and especially if you're scaling anomaly power percent, such as using the Akari set, or even just using Unstoppable Force like I just mentioned, the more percentage that you have, the more that it's actually going to scale off of this. So I'd highly recommend looking into some flat anomaly power mods, such as Arms Anomaly and Anomaly Echo. Another option that's okay for this is Power Assimilation. It's 173k. It's about as powerful as Anomaly Echo. However, if there's a ton of elites on the field, you'll just get a ridiculous amount of extra AP here. However, if you're fighting like a single boss, it's not going to be as valuable, but I would say that it is a decent alternative for Anomaly Echo. One anomaly power mod that I forgot to mention is Danger Close. I think that this is a good mod. Like if you have it on your build, it's not bad. However, I don't think it will be referenced as like the best mod that you could get in pretty much any build. Ultimately, there's usually always going to be something better, because something like Arms and Anomaly is going to give you significantly more than 6% anomaly power. But if there's a lot of enemies in close range, 24% AP, isn't certainly bad, but usually you don't really need all that much AP when it comes to mobbing. You really need all that extra AP for being able to kill bosses. Now let's talk about some survivability mods, because I think that this is pretty important. Self-medication is now the best survivability mod in the entire game. Not only is it going to increase your maximum health whenever a skill starts its cooldown, it's also going to full heal you whenever a skill starts its cooldown. Keep in mind that this means that whenever a skill is going to actually start the cooldown rather than when it's going to be used. So for example, if I'm using 2 charges of Heatwave, I actually need to put both charges to start the cooldown, and then that's going to pretty much full heal me. No matter what build you're using, if you're playing Technomancer, throw down a turret, full heal yourself. Playing Devastator, pop a Gravity Leap, full heal yourself. This mod is one of the best, if not the single best, survivability mod in the game, and I would not be surprised if it got nerfed. Secondary to that, I think Perseverance Shield is probably the second best survivability mod in the game. It's going to give you a massive shield whenever your health drops below 30%, and it has a very short internal cooldown of just 5 seconds, and Shield is actually going to have more damage reduction, so this is going to help your survivability a ton. If you want some more armor, Mitigation from Death isn't terrible, but I don't know that it's as good of an option as Perseverance Shield or self-medicated anymore. Rejuvenation gives you a decent amount of armor by default, as well as some firepower and anomaly power. I don't really think it's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type of mod. Not terrible, but not the best. That's pretty much it when it comes to all the best gear mods. Most builds are going to be using some combination of those gear mods and then just supplementing with whatever T1 and T3 actual skill mods that your character likes using. But all the ones that I mentioned are pretty much all the ones that I've even considered using and have been using in all of the builds that I've been using recently. All right, let's talk about weapon mods. We're going to be talking about which ones are good for both AP and firepower. So first off, I want to talk about some of the ones that used to be meta and how I feel about how good they are now. So first off, let's talk about Fortress. Fortress used to increase our damage by, I believe it was 25% before this patch. It is now just 20%. However, it is going to give us a good amount of survivability by increasing our armor and resistance by 15% if we stack it up, when it's fairly easy to stack it up, and it's going to increase our damage by 20, which is really good. I mean, 20% extra damage, it's going to be on its own multiplier. It's not just weapon damage, or it's not just anomaly power, it's 20% additional damage all around. So ultimately, I still think Fortress is a really good option for both firepower and anomaly power builds, and if you happen to get it as the third slot on your weapon, you should be pretty happy about that. Dark Sacrifice used to be the single best weapon mod in the entire game, but it did get pretty substantially nerfed and now gives you a 25% weapon damage bonus. The thing about Dark Sacrifice is that it actually isn't weapon damage like calculated with firepower, etc. It actually is on its own multiplier, so this means that it's pretty much 25% flat extra damage on top of everything else, so it is still one of the best, if not the best, bets when it comes to a pure firepower based build, because it's just so much extra damage. Killing Spree, however, is actually calculated with normal weapon damage, meaning it's going to severely suffer from diminishing returns unless they change that. I haven't really used it recently, but ultimately you really need a lot of damage for bosses, and Killing Spree is only going to be helpful when it comes to mobbing, so I really wouldn't recommend Killing Spree. Now let's talk about some of the new mods. So Omen is a mod that rolls on the Mythos right here. This used to give us 30% extra increased damage, but now it only gives 10%. However, 10% damage is still pretty good. It's also going to do a decent chunk of damage. I mean, 1.8 mil isn't anything to scoff at. However, it is also going to inflict bleed. The reason that inflicting bleed is good is because it enables us to maybe use something like Bloody Boost if we don't have some other good mod option. So let's see, go into T3 here, Tainted Blood, sorry. This is going to increase our damage by 16%. So if we use both this and Bloody Boost in T2, we're going to get a whole bunch of extra damage just by having this mod on. God, I'm literally blind. Bloody Boost. Another 8%. So that's 24% plus Omen giving us 10%. That's 34% extra damage from one weapon mod if we have room for Bloody Boost and Tainted Blood here. Ultimately, I think Mythos with Omen, it's a really good mod. However, the cooldown on it is a little bit unlucky and it's pretty annoying to use. But if you're taking advantage of the extra bleed status, I still think it's a pretty good option. I think it's mainly a boss mod though. I don't really think it's all that great for mobbing because of the cooldown. Another amazing new mod that we got was Mage's Rage. This is probably the single best mod for anomaly power builds because it's going to give you a massive increase to your anomaly power. This additional anomaly power, it seems to be that it would be 40%. It's going to last about 15 seconds too, which is really, really good. However, this 40% seems to actually scale on top of all of your other anomaly power percent multipliers, so it ends up giving you significantly more anomaly power than just 40%. But even if it was just 40%, that is still unbelievably good. So if you're using an anomaly power build, highly recommend using Mage's Rage and making sure to take advantage of the critical shots. Pair this with Arms and Anomaly, where you want critical shots anyway. You're going to increase your AP by a ridiculous amount. Now let's talk about the flat damage mods that are going to be both good for anomaly power and firepower builds. There's actually a ton of different ones here, so I'm going to try to speedrun them. When it comes to just flat increase of damage, there's nothing better than Dimensional Rockets. It's going to make your crit shots fire 4 rockets, and each rocket is going to do 2.4 million damage. So with this mod alone, it's nearly 9 million damage, as well as only being on a 2-second internal cooldown. When you compare that to something like Claymore Torrent being on a 2-second cooldown and only dealing 2 million damage while having some AoE effect, it is significantly better. Dimensional Rockets I think is mainly a bossing thing, but it also is pretty good for ad clear as well. It's only going to be limited to 4 mobs though, and it does have the conditional effect of requiring you landing the crits, but it's still very strong. Claymore Torrent I think is in kind of an opposite spot where it's really good for mobbing, but for bossing the single target damage is relatively lackluster. One of the better mods for single target damage is Ultimate Storm Whip. This gives 3.5 million damage, still not anywhere near Dimensional Rockets, but it's on a 3-second internal cooldown and it is still really good for damage. Shadow Comet used to be the king of AoE, and it is still very good if you're using a weapon such as a shotgun, because hitting enemies with multiple pellets will spawn multiple comets, so that is ultimately really good. I don't think it's the best option for bossing, but it is fairly good overall, and it's going to give you a lot of damage when it comes to AoE clear. Winning Winds has always been a really good mod. I think that they nerfed it pretty hard. I mean, it's an 8-second cooldown, but it is going to hit for 6.2 million damage. If you're pairing this with a weapon that has like radiation splash and clip combustion, here, let's see if we can find that. You can pretty much pair these mods together to just have a massive reload. Put this on like a pistol, for example. Look, take a look at my pistol that I have. You get Torment Agony with Moaning Winds, Clip Combustion, and Radiation Splash. Just with this weapon, I'm doing like 12 million damage, as well as applying vulnerable to enemies. So it is certainly worth having on certain weapons like pistols, but I wouldn't really recommend it on your main weapon because it's really annoying reloading and the cooldown is just super long. Another fantastic new mod that we got is Firestorm. Anytime that you hit an enemy, it's going to just summon a firestorm. It's going to deal a bunch of damage. Most importantly, it's going to inflict burn. What's really nice about this is if you're playing like a firepower build, for example, the enemy will have burn on them forever, and then you could take advantage of something like bullet kindling with just 12% extra damage. So that's really, really good, similar to why you'd want to use Omen with Tainted Blood. Also on Pyromancer, there's an interesting interaction where you can pretty much use this with Overheat to instantly consume the burn status over and over again, and it's going to constantly be inflicting that burn. So if you have a way to conflict Ash, you can pretty much just be spamming your Overheat and take advantage of Master Consumer and consume both statuses at the same time. Noxious Spawns is good for similar reasons. It's not going to do a whole bunch of extra damage, pretty much 1.6 million damage every 3 seconds. However, it is going to apply Toxic, so if you want to use this with some Toxic extra damage increase, such as Virulent Compound, or Euthanizer, or Radical Therapy, that's a good option. Similar reason is why you'd maybe want to use Stigmatized, applying Toxic, and does a decent amount of damage, but ultimately, these mods are not the best when it comes to just dealing flat damage. Violent Rupture is another amazing mod when it comes to flat damage. It's going to do 3.5 million damage every 5 seconds. However, it actually does it every 3 seconds. So when it comes to single target damage, Violent Rupture is one of the best options. Ultimately, when it comes to just doing flat amounts of damage, I think that Dimensional Rockets is number 1. Violent Rupture is probably number 2 next to Storm Whip. I would say they're relatively similar. There's a ton of other options that are pretty good, like Kinetic Stomp, Strings of Goss for AoE, blah blah blah. There's a ton of other options, but the ones that I just mentioned I think are ultimately going to be your best bet, and the ones that you guys should be looking out for when it comes to either dealing flat damage or just boosting your pre-existing damage. Of course, with very niche builds such as using Firepower Techno with Borealis, using T3 Freeze or T3 of any status could have some interesting effects. Back in the day, we used to use T3 Bleed on Trickster to actually use Vampiric Mag so we could get some ammo back, but I would see Omen just being a replacement for that. But I could see in very, very specific circumstances, maybe wanting to inflict Ash constantly to apply Ash for some reason using Action Boost or something. I don't know, there's probably reasons for that, but I'd say ultimately most of those status effect mods you probably don't use, and Ultimate Freezing Bolts is probably one of the only ones that you use, specifically for Firepower Techno to take advantage of Borealis Monarch, because I mean that's 60% extra damage all the time, which literally nothing else can beat. That's pretty much going to be it for the video. Please let me know down in the comments if I managed to leave anything out. I'm also going to leave a detailed explanation to all of these mods in the comment section below so you guys can pretty easily reference it. Hopefully the video wasn't too disjointed for you guys. I'm pretty tired, so it was a bit difficult for me to go over everything, and this video ended up being way longer than I intended, but hopefully you guys learned something. If you did, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe for videos similar to this one, check me out on Twitch, and I'll be making a ton of videos in the future, so make sure to be on the lookout for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.